aggression, but there's no interesting endgame, and there's not a lot of strategy. So let's take a look at the 1.5 million.
I mean, that makes sense, but at the same time, though, 1 point per kill is absurd. It should be worth a lot more per kill. Maybe like 2 points per kill, 1.5. I don't know. But hey.
$1 Summer Skirmish as an example that was also held in 2018. Here the finals in week 8 were solos, and in order to get any points for placement you'd need to get into the top 10, and then to get a second placement point you need to place second or third, and then finally you need to get an additional point for winning the game, so 3 placement points total. You could also get points for elims, but you needed to get 3 in order to get a single point. Then once you got 5 elims you'd get a second point, and then if you got 7 or more elims you would just get 3 points. But this meant that if you placed 11th with 2 elims, which is a very respectable match, you got 0 points. Now, in a tournament like this, it's easier for the majority of players to get into a top 10 than it is to get 3 elims, so in the Summer Skirmish, for example, it makes a lot of sense that everyone played very passively. In this restrictive format led to players tying in points a lot, to the point that one qualifier slot to the finals was actually decided by a literal coin flip.
We've got it.
I think that was absurd. That was kind of funny, though. I respect it.
Because their points, victory royales, elims, and average placement were all exactly the same. RIP to Colton FN, who missed out to a qualification slot to the finals because of literal RNG. Now, Epic Games knew that passive play was very boring, and even attempted to make the matches more interesting by adding bonuses for players who dropped high elimination games. For example, in week 2 of the Summer Skirmish, they added a $10,000 bonus for anyone who dropped a 20 elim win, which, you know, kind of unrealistic. And
bro, 20 kills, that's $10,000. That means you're basically going to get 11th to 15th place prize pool. And you're probably going to be able to qualify, or not qualify, but get a higher placement if you even drop a 20 bomb, because all the points are just boom, boom, boom.
And then they even went as far away as giving $50,000 to the team with the most elims in a match in week number 4. They attempted a lot of different things, but all of these points that I've just said are easily summarized as people play for placement, and that is boring to watch. So too many players creates a ton of lag, and there's too many players because everyone is playing passive, but they can't play too aggressively because then playing to survive won't be important, which is the entire point of a battle royale. So this problem is very complex and actually requires a very complex solution. Storm Surge. A Storm Surge allows the number of players alive in a game to be controlled by, at certain points in the game, damaging the players who have dealt the least amount of damage themselves. No longer can you sit and do nothing in your box, as you'll start to take damage at certain points in the game if there's too many players alive, and you will die to Storm Surge. This mechanic is actually in every playlist, including public matches. It's just extremely rare. I asked my good friends at Assyrian GG to see if they could find any games out of the 40,000 or so they had on their database, and in pubs and ranked, 0 of these had Storm Surge. Now that doesn't mean it doesn't happen, there's a lot more games than this, but it's extremely rare. You almost never see it because, of course, players just don't play this passively outside of tournaments, so the player numbers are just never high enough. Now, Surge has changed a ton over the years, but its current day format is probably the easiest to get into. Let's start with the first time it's active, which is the second zone. If there are more than 90 players alive when the second zone appears, then the players who have dealt the least damage will be tagged for 25 damage every 5 seconds, and Surge will only stop once there's 90 players alive. So if there's 91 players alive and you have done the least damage, you will be the one taking damage from Surge. You can only stop the Storm Surge damage by dealing damage to other players, which will put you above the threshold shown on the right side of your screen. One storm circle before, there will also be a warning that pops up just to let you know that it's going to happen when the storm closes. So how much damage is enough? Well, a lot of people, and a lot of badly researched articles, think that there's a set number of damage you need to deal per zone, but in reality it is a leaderboard. So in our 91 player live match, let's say our bottom damaging player, Aussie Antics, has only dealt 25 damage because he's missed every bullet outside of 1. Now our 90th player on the leaderboard, Boop, has only dealt 26 damage for the same reason, but he had a little better weapon and it dealt 1 more damage. Now when the second zone appears, Aussie will start to take Storm Surge damage because he's below the 90 player threshold. However, as soon as he eventually hits a shot, finally, and deals more damage than Boop, he'll overtake him and be above the threshold, meaning now Boop is below and needs to deal damage, but of course he's not going to hit a shot because he'll miss everything also. This will continue until there's only 90 players alive, and then this will repeat in the third storm circle with a different player threshold. Of course, I'm second all the way up at the top of the leaderboard because I've been frying these shitters, but of course this imaginary match is in a tournament, so I'm losing on damage to a hacker. So the thresholds and saying damage 100 times is quite difficult to remember, but it is actually quite a good system to ensure that the passive players actually deal out damage and don't just do nothing for the entire game. But of course, it wouldn't be a Fortnite mechanic without some bugs and cheeses. In multiple Fortnite seasons, what was actually counted as damage has been very, very questionable. In Chapter 2, Season 3, damage to Marauders, a group of roaming NPCs, actually counted towards the total damage you've dealt. This means that there were some teams who could deal an insane amount of damage and completely bypass Storm Surge altogether. Now, some players were stupid enough to leak the strategy into Pro Scrims, meaning it never made it into FNCS, but this kind of similar thing kept reoccurring, as in Chapter 2 Season 5, the NPC the Mandalorian also counted as damage towards Storm Surge. Now, some players like Kree, who were attempting to qualify for the FNCS Grand Finals by playing heal off in the Storm only, used an insane amount of heals in the Storm to out-heal the damage. Now, for any normal team, you could out-heal Storm Surge in some situations. However, this would leave you with nothing in your inventory to play out the rest of the game, so it's just not worth doing. And this only worked for Kree and the heal off players because they had abundance of heals around them and literally nothing else. The strategy was, of course, so game-breaking that the Storm Sickness mechanic needed to be added to the game to counteract it. But the most...
Bro, I hate Storm Sickness so much. Like, if there was one thing I would remove, it'd be Storm Sickness, bro.
controversial part of Storm Surge is, of course, trading. And back in Chapter 2, NA players Bucky, Creo, Slacks, and Keys were banned for 60 days for doing it. Now, they dropped at Slurpy Swamps, and each game repeatedly damaged each other, ensuring not to fully eliminate or knock the other team before using the heals in the drop spot around them to replenish their lost HP. They gained Storm Surge damage without losing anything, and both teams kind of benefited from this. Now, the difficulty here comes in assessing if this is a pre-agreed teaming, where you've both agreed to do this, or if it's just smart and they've actually scrimmed and played against each other a lot. This also happens a ton in other Fortnite tournaments, with Slurp Lance being a major problem in Chapter 4, as they healed you infinitely, so two opposing players could just tag each other, heal with these plants, and repeat. Even in Tayson and Mercenash did this with Trulex and Chicho at the FNCS Global Championships in their drop spot. In this situation, neither teams benefit from pushing the other, and despite the odd looks, it actually does look like a legitimate strategy, not teaming, but there's no way to tell if these players agreed to do this ahead of time, or if it's just a smart play to allow both teams to increase their damage. Of course, this is what makes trading Storm Surge so controversial. And honestly, the most ironic part of Storm Surge is that the goal is to reduce player counts to prevent lag and promote aggression. But if the server is already lagging while players are trying to deal damage, then these shots often just blank and don't register, or the players will be teleporting all about, which obviously makes it incredibly difficult to rack up the damage, making it a little bit RNG. It seems like in Chapter 5, this has been made even worse, as a frozen player on your screen will still take damage if you shoot them, resulting in some insanely broken endgame clips. Now, racking up Storm Surge damage is incredibly difficult and requires a very deep understanding of how zone pulls and where players are likely to position because of this. And if you want to learn more about how pro players strategize and plan for Storm Surge, you can click the video on screen right now.
I might react to this video next. Bye bye.